We will be trying to gather some ideas that we have been hearing during the last half part of this session regarding systems biology and complexity and so on. So we have a very diverse panel of experts, so I guess it would be fun. First of all, thinking about complexity and systems biology, what do you think is the essential features of biological systems that turns them into complex systems? I don't know. Who wants to comment on that? Peter?
So maybe I start. This is working, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's always difficult when you sit on the in front to hear the microphones work. Huh? So, yep. Okay, I play Rockstar again. Yeah, so I mean, regulation is one of these things, but that's of course not specific to biological system. You also will have that certainly in socio-economic systems. A second thing that I believe is very important in the biological systems is the way they come about by evolution. So there is no pre-planning. You're very limited in the type of innovation that you can get at any point in time in these systems. So I think this explains quite a bit of this sort of multi-layered, interleaved way of how different subsystems are entangled with lots of connections, with lots of direct interactions between different levels. That simply comes from the fact that the only way how evolution can act is to take advantage of whatever happens to work in a variation, and that also implies this very strong dependence on history. So what works as an innovation in one lineage, say a mammal that already lives in the water, simply doesn't work for something else that also lives in the water, simply because you cannot get the same innovations, you cannot get the same changes, because the way how your system is set up, how your body plan is, simply doesn't allow you to directly evolve fins or something like this, right?
Javier, would you like to elaborate a bit more?
Yeah, well, I would like to make a reflection on the issue, because I mean, I'm not really working on complex systems, as you may think, because I mean, to me, as far as I can see, with other scientists that do biosciences, we learn to do science by simplicity, you know, to choose one question, to choose one model, to choose a number of variables that we can measure, to observe, to repeat, and to, you know, then question what we got. And then to me, when you say complex science, is like, well, I mean, many of the most simplistic metabolic pathways are complex, right? I mean, if I study, I'm a microbiologist. I mean, I grew up by culturing bacteria in petri dishes and, you know, sampling patients and studying the effect of what they produce in the intestine of mouse or whatever, looking for toxins. But then I think that this concept of complex science is also, to me, as the way science is evolving. Like this is a step of evolution in our field, because I mean, now after, I won't say how many years I've been on this field, but believe me, a lot. But I mean, it's at this time, I am working with bioinformatics. I am working with medical doctors. I am working with epidemiologists. I am working with entomologists. I am working with geographical people because I study diseases in the concept of regions and populations and ancestry. So at this point, I guess I am in a complex way of doing science, right? And so that is a sum of disciplines that in each discipline may be complex, and within a discipline you may have different systems. And I mean, to me, a system is the sum of different parts. But this sum can be, I don't know, 10 elements or maybe 1,000 elements. Where is this ending up? I don't know. I mean, let me just give you one example. I study gastric cancer, and the main risk factor for gastric cancer is one infection, Helicobacter pylori. Okay, so as a microbiologist, I learned and I studied the many different virulence factors that these bacteria produce. But then in the process, I understood that, and we learned that this bacteria, it's acquired during childhood, and then it is evolving along the whole life of the individual by millions and millions of generations of the bacteria within one niche where he is the king. There is no other one but the bacteria and the epithelial cell of the gastric mucosa. And they talk to each other. Like the dialogue of two kings, right? Bacteria and human. And they have evolved for thousands and thousands of years. So how complex can this be? And so we learned that, ancestry of the bacteria and ancestry of the host is important in this context of health or gastric cancer. So then it's evolution. And I could go on and on and on. I just want to put the point on the table. To me, it's not like I can define complex here and there. After that is what? Mega complex or what? I don't know.
Thank you, Javier. And perhaps one of the tenets that we have learned by doing complex science in the last, let's say, 3 to 4 decades is that this idea of universality or sharing like elements, like using ideas from one field into another. So, and this is related with the question of the methods. So, how are the methods of complex systems applied to biological systems, and to what extent are we being successful in doing so? Maribel. Okay.
Okay, so what I think is that we are still, I think there are many things in complex systems or in the field of complex systems that we could use that we are not really using. What I see now, I study evolution, I like evolution a lot. And what we see in evolution is that there are many layers, as Peter was mentioning, and we still lacking like a more holistic framework to study all these layers, right? Like, okay, so people study a set of genes and all the details and the functions and how they could have emerged through these either innovations or transfers. Other people study the evolution of a species. Other people study the evolution of the development of populations or ecological interactions, right? Like how or climate change or how adaptations influence these species. But I think like there have been some efforts to study the whole framework, but still there is a big lack of them, I think. I would like to see, for example, how the changes in the genome impact the evolution of the species and how this impacts the interaction with other species, the symbiosis of the species, and how this impacts in the populations, also in the environment. And then there is also a feedback, right? Because then these new interactions on these new emergent properties can have this feedback that then they're also impacting the way their genome is organized, right? So it's more like always like going up and down, and I think that we still lack some methods to do this complete framework. So this is one of the things that I would like to understand, and probably maybe Adam, would you want to say more about methods?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I entered the world of complex science this morning. So I'm not ready to criticize anything, and I don't necessarily have the background to say what's missing. But what I think when I hear this is, well, there's lots of theory, but I think we need a sort of approach like in physics, where there are theorists and there are experimenters, and the theory doesn't hold, right, unless, I don't know if it doesn't hold, but at least there are experimenters who are coming behind and always trying to test the theory and to see if the theory needs to be refined. So as kind of a statistician, I'm on the experimenter side. I'm like, well, that's nice, that's complicated, you know, that perhaps covers the situation that we're in, but I really want to design something, experiments to find out whether the theory is true, and to just try to build in that way, that there's a theory and behind that there's an experiment. If it works out, then more theoretical work would come. And so this is sort of how I see things. I was motivated, I won't say whose name, but when I was in New York, there was someone there who was sort of famous, and he had a whole theory of the cell, and he had a lot of differential equations that described the cell. It's like, okay, that's nice, but do you have any experimental evidence that anything that you're saying is true? Maybe he did, but they didn't go into any of his talks. So that's sort of what that's what I see. And I don't know if Javier wants to.
It's on a related issue. I mean, a few of us are theoreticians, so we are along the same lines of thought, coming from a physics background, of doing theory and experiments like going hand in hand. And we have been talking previous to that roundtable about a third way of looking at things, which is this emergence of machine learning and AI. So what could be the role of these computational techniques and statistical learning, machine learning, AI, on building this new form of understanding in biology? I mean, it would be like being head-to-head with the theoreticians. It would be more along with the experimentalists. Is it just pure hype, or we would get something out of it? Peter.
Yeah, so this is a difficult complex of questions, because so I don't think that we can use AI just as a replacement for theory or for mechanistic models. On the other hand, it's also clear that you cannot measure everything in detail, not every interaction in a biological system. So we need a way, essentially a statistical framework, to estimate parameters in the models that we have, to identify whether bits and pieces are missing. And I think modern machine learning approaches are extremely powerful to do that. But what I'm wary in this area is the kind of overly optimistic way that if we just throw enough data on the machine, then it will eventually save us the hassle of actually thinking about how things work. And that, I think, is not going to work. And neither just on the way of prediction and certainly not on the way of making any progress in better understanding the systems that we are working with.
Maribel, you're a computer scientist.
Okay. Yeah, so I agree, but I also think that we are moving towards these black boxes, right? Like we are all using AI and machine learning, deep learning, only as black boxes and not like really questioning whether we are really understanding our system, right? So I think like these methods help us, we are becoming good at predicting, but are we really becoming good at understanding things? I think that's the main thing. Like when we predict something, are we just predicting and describe it, but are we really understanding the biological process? So I also agree that we cannot like only use AI to substitute the other things like graph theory, probability, statistics, and many other things that people use in physics. So maybe I am betting more for the hybrid models, right? That where we use our artificial intelligence, but we combine them also with other mechanistic models. That's my.
If I may add, just one little example that sort of was at the heart of systems biology. So the standard approach there was take a data set and then build a minimal model of interaction with the minimum number of interaction that predicts or that reproduces the data. And if you do this in the realm of gene regulation, you get something that for a while predicts very nicely, but it has absolutely no relationship at all to what is structurally there, because evolution evolved these gene regulatory networks to have many, to be highly redundant. So the whole idea of we minimize the number of interaction already means you get something that has nothing to do with reality as your implementation of the model. And I think machine learning approaches have that same problem. They just miss out on a part of the structural underpinning that we can know, that we do have theories for. We just don't know how to teach them into these machines.
Thank you. Javier, well, you're an experimentalist. Do you have some words to add to that?
Yes, I am. I don't know, I just was remembering one phrase that a friend of mine did on religion, but this, I think it can be applied to AE. I mean, he says that nature make the man and men make God. I would say nature make men, but men make AI. People often forget that. I mean, this is a tool made by man. And so how good is it? It depends on us. What we need to understand is what we are doing, right? I mean, we are creating very powerful tools that get out of control, but at the beginning they were constructed with algorithms that we, developed. So in that sense, I mean, it is theory to me, and you will never get rid of the confirmation, of the validation. So you have to go back. I mean, this is just like going back a little bit. I don't think basic science will disappear because AE is here or because these complex systems are here. They will be existing as the sum of the different disciplines and as the sum of the different basic simplistic points of view. And so to me, it is very useful, of course, but as an editor of some journals, I mean, one of the first things we do is to try to find out if the paper was, involved with AE and to which extent, because I mean, this is very, very, strong discussion on. I mean, some authors sometimes even suggest that one of the co-authors of the manuscript is AI. So come on. I mean, it's like dogs and sons. I mean, it's not to humanize what we build. So I mean, I think we have to do is to go slowly and carefully. It's again, the technology is evolving faster than our brains, and to me, that is the issue.
Okay, Adam, well, you're a statistician and you use machine learning models, so.
Yeah, I have a couple ideas. I have been doing this before. This isn't something I just learned this morning. I teach the introductory course in machine learning at my university, and I know what neural networks are, I know what large language models are, so I do know a little bit in this case what I'm talking about. So first though, I'd like to talk about AI, and perhaps that's an unearned term, because there's nothing really artificial about what the current AI, large language models built on neural networks are. They're just particular models. It's interesting that you can talk to them or you can type. The whole chat part is interesting, but if you ignore that part, the back end is just statistical models, and they happen to be neural network models, but they could be other kinds of regression models or tree-based models or whatever. So they're really nothing that special. What makes them special is how they stole data that was publicly not available, but beg for, don't ask permission, beg for forgiveness. So they stole all this data, and so they have an incredible back-end databases. So if you ask them a question, they can give you an answer because they stole the data to get that answer. They can be great for a number of tasks, but real artificial intelligence, the way I see it, would be if you could touch and you could feel, if you had probably robots or some other kinds of sensors, they could touch and feel and gain new knowledge. AI right now is not about new knowledge. It's only summarizing based on the data that it stole. So that I think it shouldn't. I think there should be a better name for that AI. The other kind of AI, what I'd call real AI, real information generating. I'm sure there's people. I mean, I live in the Bay Area. I live in Palo Alto near Stanford, and I work at UCSF, and across the street is OpenAI. So I'm sure somewhere in my path during my days, there are people who are developing real AI, and it doesn't seem impossible that you could have machines learning in ways like how people learn. It just doesn't exist as far as I know. So that's one thing. The second thing is, when you're looking at these really hard problems in biology, I would say there's 10 layers of context. So you have to know the disease, and you have to know the patients, and you have to know what background the patients were and how the machines might not have worked, and layer after layer after layer. And AI only can respond to what you give it. And trying to give it that level of context seems very, very hard right now, perhaps possible someday, but it doesn't replace people. And so people would be interacting with that AI to say, this is important, this is not important, to sort of have like a whole tree of context that they would feed to the AI. So instead of writing code with all that context, perhaps the AI could write the code for you. But the people are really doing the hard work. The AI would be doing the final step in what I see, because the context is so complicated. But I could be wrong.
On purpose of that, it's a question arises on my mind regarding what you were saying, Adam. Do you think that this real AI is like, let's say, tokenizing the researcher's mind, like building, like translating the researcher mind into a prompt machine or something to ask the precise questions in the way that machines quotes, 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 understood.
Wait, do I think that that exists, that some people are working on that? I do think some people are working on it. There was a new company that was just formed, I can't remember, with some all-star team of people who dropped out of other AI companies who wanted to answer scientific questions particularly, and I'd like to think that they're smart enough to know that what exists isn't what's going to get them there. So I do think that that will be coming. I have no idea at what rate that will come, whether that's measured in like my lifetime, my kid's lifetime, my unborn grandchildren's lifetime. Like I don't know. I think that that's going to be really difficult, but that incremental progress will be made along the way. But I know what I know, and I don't know that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Peter, would you like to add?
One brief comment on this.
Yeah.
There is actually quite surprisingly exciting progress in the area of mathematics, where large language models get used to basically propose possible theorems that you then feed into classical theorem checkers.
Like the Lean platform?
Among others, so people are working on various different ways. So there's also approaches that basically just use especially trained large language models that just have seen mathematical texts. And basically, you can use them to propose interesting theorems, at least interesting also to experts in their respective fields, and get the machine to propose proof strategies that then you can use in actual logic programming languages to check whether these proof strategies actually go through. So maybe surprisingly in pure maths, this might actually be a bit further than in applications to real sciences, where you need a backend that actually does, or a front end that actually does experiments for you, which is much more difficult than in the pure math area there. But that's an exciting development, I think, in this direction.
Sounds great. Well, moving on to closing this session and talking about this futuristic kind of way of thinking, one interesting question is how will the future could be, if we can imagine it, and in which ways do you think that it will be different from what we currently have? And I would like each one of you to comment on it. Who would you like to start? Maribel? This one?
So what I would like, well, just taking the point of the AI, something we know is that we are behind that, right? So we humans are behind that. And so far we have a lot of problems with the AI because of the data we use. So we have a lot of bias, right? So depending if our data is biased, if our data is unbalanced, if our algorithms are biased as well. So there are a lot of still challenges that we have to tackle. And I think like many of our new generations or people who have no knowledge about how the AI work or deep learning work is that we don't take that into account. And that's why, it has happened with racism, right? Like that our AI platforms sometimes are racist. And this is the same in biology, right? Like even though we generate a lot of data sets in genomic, transcriptomic, and so all type of data sets, interactions, microbiomes, everything, like we are not sure, or we have to make sure that this is balanced, right? That there is no bias, that we are not training something that doesn't help us to understand anything. So my perspective would be that we first try to solve the problems that we already have, like such, so that anything that gives us bias, like in biology, but also in other fields. And I hope that there is a bigger group of people who will work on that.
Okay. Whoever? Peter, Javier?
Yeah, so speaking about bioinformatics, molecular biology, so life sciences in general, I think with easier access to data, there will also be more theory, not only in terms of statistical models, but also in terms of mechanistic models that sort of get parameterized based on statistical methods, simply because measuring everything is not possible. So this is I think one part of the development that I foresee in this area. What is also, I think, somewhere on the horizon, because it's kind of there in chemistry, but not yet in the life sciences, that is automatized lab, automatized experimentation that gets linked to eventually artificial intelligence systems. So I'm part of grant applications in Germany on what's called microchemistry, which is basically chemical labs on a chip that you address with basically fully automatized, eventually closed loop systems. Labs? So they should be, eventually the point is to have them self-driving, but you don't want $1 zillion lab that does that macroscopically. You want to do this as a microfluidics or other technology on a small chip, or linking a few chips together, including all the analytics. And we're slowly getting there in terms of the instrumentation that this is actually a reasonable proposal that you get past your reviewers.
Okay. Javier?
Yeah, well, I see right now a huge problem with the new generation of scientists that are coming, because they are the future. I mean, I cannot imagine what will be tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. They will, and they will build it. So to me, it would be, one of the most important duties of us as mentors or teachers to talk to them in the sense that, hey, this AI thing, I mean, it's growing, it's getting there, but don't use it, right? I mean, learn how this was born and then how useful it is right now. I mean, right now, even many of us as scientists are tempted to go to IE when we don't know what to do with so many data. And that's okay. I mean, our mistake will be the successful or the new ones, right? So we have to test and fail. But I mean, to me, this is one point. I mean, we have to take this into consideration with our students, and very carefully. And then, how I would like the future to be? I would like that the disciplines would progressively disappear. Like, I would like to have seen students from medicine in this auditorium right now, and that they could get in touch with all these problems of biology, but also with all these new tools and all this concept of complexity. Because, I mean, to me, many fields are left behind because they keep isolated in the sense of the education. The programs are so rigid, and it's very difficult to change. I understand that this center, as a big example, is not really understood by other universities in this camp, and I mean, so I say, well, if it is not inside the university, how can the society get into this, and how the new people who wants to get, into this field and look for problems of the environment and health and economists and so forth, I mean, how would they get into this concept? So I would like, these barriers of disciplines to disappear since the beginning, since the education. And I mean, as you do, you promote this completely new concept for many of us all over the world of science of complexity. So I would like this concept to grow and to be seen as, you know, the way to solve our life and our planet.
Adam, please.
Okay, just a couple of final points. So one is, and it was sort of building on what Peter was saying. I was a little worried he was going to say exactly the same thing, and then I'd be out of an idea. But you know, the next big wave that's going to hit the Bay Area is humanoid robots. You know, in the next 5 years, and I believe Elon Musk is building them at Tesla. There's many competitors. I think they're ahead in China, but whatever the case, just a few years away from being able to do much better experiments, because as great as people are, they make mistakes when they're doing science, when they're just you know, pipetting or freezing or thawing or doing all those things that I don't do before they bring me the data. But often I get data and it's like, oh yeah, we made this mistake, we made that mistake. So the automation of experiments, while a problem for junior scientists and people trying to break into the field, in terms of labor, is going to be hugely beneficial towards creating better, reproducible data. So that's exciting, and robots don't get tired, you know, and so we'll have you know, many more and better experiments. But the thing that I fear that hasn't been brought up in the future, it's sort of starting to happen in the present, well, first, people don't want to review each other's papers anymore. I hear everybody, they can't find reviewers. They talk to 100 people in order to find the reviewers. So there has to be some mechanism of what is true and what is not true. It's easier and easier to create a paper, but it is not, you know, thoughtful people have to be stewards of the truth. At the same time that the truth, especially in the States, is being so politicized, I know those aren't exactly the same thing, but it kind of comes together, is how to protect, how do we make progress when perhaps it'll be written into our software that things are not allowed, or, you know, because they're politically not expedient. So I think that we have to give our time, not just to ourselves, but to the community, to protect the truth and make sure we're not going to go like this, but at least that we go, you know, like this in terms of making progress. So that's my final thought.
Thank you. Perhaps we have time for a couple of questions from the audience before closing the table. We have one question all the way back, and then we have Chris all the way front. And then Javier. Sorry, Javier. I haven't seen you. Yeah. We could keep one mic, and we'll give you the other one.
Thank you. Please. Okay, so we will start with him.
Okay, my question, I think all of you could really answer it in a very interesting way. So for me, it's really curious how this started as a talk basically about complexity in biology, and how at the end, it transformed more into the talk about AI and what it can capture and what it can. And for me, there's an umbrella that actually connects both points in a very interesting way, and is to what extent our current relationship with science really it's sufficient to answer both fronts of this discussion. What I mean by that is, at the beginning, and there was a lot of questions about what do you mean by complexity, what is the point of complexity in biological systems, and how we can assure that we have the tools to talk about that. And when it comes to the later part about AI, when you talk about specifically the data, for me, a lot of that taking AI as a valid source of truth or information basically comes to the way we treat data, and this also connects with our relationship with science, because if we can take a part of reality, measure it, and then transform that into data, then how it's really that untrustworthy this system, if all it does is takes a look at the data and looks at its correlation in order to produce an answer. So to what extent we need to change our relationship with science, because we're basically within that old saying, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like an A.
Okay, so let me try to answer at least part of these. So I guess the connection of life sciences and complexity is essentially, as we acquire more and more data, we realize that very simple sort of single chain models are just not describing what we're interested in. At the same time, when we get to these very multifaceted, heterogeneous data that we have in practice, classical approaches from statistics become very difficult or simply not applicable to these type of data. In this setting, modern AI/machine learning models, and here I think not in particular not at LLMs or something like that that talks to you, but rather deep learning models and sort of this type of things that you connect directly to or can connect directly to measurement data is essentially an expedient and useful statistical device to get more complex, more complicated, whatever you want to call it, statistical models that can actually deal with the data that we are confronted with in reality. So I think this is sort of this connection between a complexity that gives us structure to the models that also allows us to integrate a certain amount of data, and machine learning on the other side as basically the modern way of simple regression models, to be a little bit provocative here.
Thank you, Peter. Chris? Chris or Javier? Chris, I guess it's close.
Okay, so I'm not going to go off in a tirade as a usual deal about what's complexity and what's not. In some sense, it's like uniform across what Marta was saying this morning, etc., etc. It's the following. What often we just miss is that, let's call them complex adaptive systems, that are immensely phenomenologically rich. Now, that doesn't mean we have the data that basically we can use to model that phenomenological richness. So when you're saying, Javier, about when you were young with just the culture and things like that, you were studying. Yeah, I think the battery's gone. You were studying a complex system, a complex adaptive system. But just because you were concentrating on one predictor and one target variable, that doesn't mean it wasn't complex. But you were looking at it from its complexity, which is phenomenologically complex. And thinking about a city, if you've got a scaling law, you can have a scaling law in biology, a scaling law in cities, but how many things can you say about a city? You've said one thing, if you've got one scaling law, maybe obviously you're saying a lot more, but it's back to this thing of what we miss is the problem of how many things can we and should we say about a particular system? You know, like Helicobacter pylori. Well, there's a hell of a lot of life history of the people who have it, you know, their socioeconomic backgrounds, this, that, and the other, that if you just look at a culture in the laboratory, you miss. It doesn't mean that it's irrelevant, it's just you're looking at one particular part of it phenomenologically. So the challenge is like, how do we all get together to try and, once again, have this more holistic point of view? Because just looking at one thing, unless you're talking about a monogenic disease or something like that, there is simplicity at times in biological systems, but in general, it's not. And so, you know, and then in defense of machine learning, I think it's the only way we've got to get piles of data and to basically use machine learning to try and make phenomenological sense of it. But, you know, Peter's completely right. You can't just leave it to the thing. I mean, the thing's an idiot. But the point would be is that at least it reads database and we don't, right? So the thing is you need it to be able to organize the data in some sense, so then you can use your human intelligence to kind of then use that as input. But you need more than one human intelligence, right? If you're looking across all the multi-scales and things like that, you need a bunch of people to be trying to tell you what the hell's going on in that data. So that's, I think, the huge challenge. You know, one of my problems is there's too many people trying to be Newton and not enough people trying to be Kepler, right? So in other words, you know, well, first we need phenomenological models, and then you can think about, is there something deeper behind it? But make sense of the data, you know, phenomenologically first.
Can I just comment on this last? I mean, during my comments, I was trying to get my point of view clear that, I mean, science as we know it, it will not disappear. Science as we know it will be the same. And then these complex systems are, as I said, evolution of making science, because we're accumulating more and more methods to measure. And then instead of measuring 4, 5, 10, 20 variables, we can now measure thousands of variables, and not in one single cell, or not in one tissue, or not in one human being. We can measure also the environment, you know, the contaminants, the temperature, the humidity, the ancestry, the population, the region, blah, 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 blah. I mean, we are building a very complex way to accumulate knowledge, and I agree that, I mean, we don't have brain to get all this together, and then that's why we are building these systems to analyze these layers and layers and layers that are accumulating, and so I mean it's so in that sense I don't think when we talk about AI or complex system, I don't think people is trying to say that the old way of doing science is old-fashioned. No, I don't think so. I mean, they are just using the new fields, and those new fields will be, you know, making better and better, and will be that. I mean, tools to get the truth.
Yes, I wanted to participate in I recently attended a specialized symposium or congress on the use, really it was about protein structure and function and evolution. And it was very clear that the sessions were very deeply influenced by the arrival of AlphaFold, okay, this new way of dealing with your proteins. Not necessarily understanding them. It's obvious for everyone in the field that we are not understanding much more than we were understanding before. But we are working in a very significantly different way, because we now have predictions that are valid regardless of our understanding. And that's, I think, quite important. Predictions that work make you advance in some ways and pose new questions, and certainly start moving the field in different fashions. So I think this is going to start happening in other fields. I think the power of the algorithms and the neural networks, the use of transformers and the foundation models and so on, all this jargon that I don't really understand very well, but it seems to me that it's going to modify the way that we do our science. And much of it does have to do with dealing in a better way with complex systems, I believe. I don't know what would be your reaction to this?
If I may, so AlphaFold, I think, is an extremely nice example, and thanks for bringing it up, because we understand reasonably well what AlphaFold does and what it can predict in protein structures and what it can't predict. The one thing that it didn't do is solve the problem how protein folding actually works. But if you're interested in knowing what the structure of a protein that actually has evolved over billions of years is, then this is something that AlphaFold does with very high accuracy. And this is what you need to design a drug, for instance, to address it. You don't care at all whether you understand the physics of the protein folding for that particular protein. That's just not relevant for this particular task. And I think this is something that we have to be aware in many of the AI/machine learning applications. They do predictions, they solve problems for us in a particular context, and it only gets dangerous if we start ignoring that context and believe AlphaFold has now solved the protein folding problem, and there is no interesting scientific problem for other things, like if you want to understand the dynamics of protein folding or refolding of proteins, that AlphaFold won't help you much. For other things, it's a super tool, and it should be used.
Anyone else?
Well, we are running out of time, but perhaps final question.
Final question, yes.
Somehow you have been presenting very interesting ideas about how the dynamics of life works and how they could be computational or not, or how they can be approached computationally or not. But what about the biggest problem of this incredible bifurcation, we could say, that happens when you have a complex systems? His complexity begins to increase until it reaches the deus ex machina of life. And what about computation there? What are your ideas of whether computation, algorithms, or some form of knowledge we have would be able to approach it?
So I fear I have to answer this because I guess this was pretty much addressed to me. So obviously I don't have the answer to the origin of life, but I mean I've been working in these areas as well, and so we do have some ideas on transitions from purely chemical systems to systems that eventually show Darwinian evolution and could be classified as biology. And sort of the what we believe is what you need at this transition somewhere is the closure of autocatalytic chemical reaction networks. So this is something that we've started to develop theories that are actually workable in terms of also algorithms that can find autocatalytic subsystems in large chemical networks, whether simulated or coming out of databases. So I think there is progress. I won't promise that we have a solution to the origin of life anytime soon, but I think we do make progress in understanding what are the steps that can bridge the gaps from something that's just a chemical soup and eventually makes brown tar to something that actually starts growing and self-replicates. So I don't think I want to say more on this now.
Okay, we thank all of our amazing speakers, for they were not only able to discuss our questions and ask about it, but also to play musical chairs with the mics. So a big round of applause, please. I guess Aleida is closing, right?